All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back on this Friday morning. You're taking a live look at Joint Base Andrews. What you're seeing here is the Trump presidential motorcade arriving at Joint Base Andrews. Of course, today is huge. They're arriving here at the airport so that he and his team can take off for Anchorage, Alaska here any moment now. Today is the big high-stakes summit. Sit-down meeting, that face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin to talk about the war in Ukraine. President Trump has warned that Russia must take serious steps and commit toward a ceasefire deal, or else it'll face harsh sanctions over it. His car pulling up here on the tarmac right next to Air Force One. And of course, the big thought for today is that we could just be hours away from talks that end the bloodshed after 3.5 years of a war with Ukraine. Of course, his team, Secret Service here, flanking his car. I think that might be his head that's popping out of this vehicle here. We'll see him hop up these steps any moment now. But will he be able to strike a deal today, or at least set the foundation for talks in a trilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky? And yep, there he goes up the steps. His team not too far behind him. NewsNation's Robert Sherman has the latest from Kyiv. Of course, we have our eyes on D.C. this morning and the president taking off. But Robert, let me get to you in Ukraine. What are we expecting today from this sit down? What's the feeling there about how these talks are going to go now that he's officially aboard Air Force One?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say that really plays into this whole situation on the ground here in Ukraine, Mark, is that people truly have no idea what is going to come out of Anchorage today. And Ukraine is not going to have any delegation at all of these meetings. So the entire conversation revolving the future of Ukraine is largely going to be held between two world leaders thousands of miles away in Alaska. That's something that everyone on the ground here in Ukraine recognizes. And as you watch the president boarding Air Force One here, you detect a completely different tone from the president heading into this meeting than you have heard from some of these other diplomatic summits that he has had in the past. President Trump has totally placed the ball in Russia's court, saying that it is up to Russia whether they are going to come to this meeting earnestly or not, whether they are going to be serious about making a deal or not, leaving the door open for the possibility that this conversation that takes place with the Russian leader is a fruitless one and ends in a matter of minutes. You even heard the president saying this here, that this is all up to Russia about how serious they intend to be or not. You listen to the back and forth that is going on between both of these sides. The president really summing it up on Truth Social this morning, describing this summit as high stakes, with the Russian delegation, one of the special envoys for Russian President Vladimir Putin corroborating that today, saying, true. That's the back and forth you're hearing between the United States and Russia heading into all of these conversations here. From the Ukrainian side, they are emphasizing that the United States should tread very lightly as they head into this meeting with the Russians, because they believe that Russian President Vladimir Putin will attempt to deceive the American delegation, particularly President Trump, give the impression that they are looking for peace, while on the back end trying to carry on this war effort here. That's the sentiment that you have on the ground here in Ukraine, as they fear that this situation could escalate in the Donetsk region, in the Donbass, and all of this is a game of smoke and mirrors. We will all find out in the coming hours here which one of these ends up proving to be right. Is Russia coming to Alaska earnestly, or are they coming here to play games? A matter of hours is going to tell all of that. Yeah. Marky?
And, you know, Robert, as you and I both know, land and real estate is top of Putin's wish list, right? I mean, he's chomping at the bit to get his hands on southern and eastern Ukraine, which he's coveted for a long time. Are there any concessions that Zelensky is prepared to make to hopefully appeal in a different way outside of territory?
You know, what the Ukrainians have said is that they are open to negotiations and they are open to conversations that guarantee long-term security for Ukraine. That has been a huge sticking point from the Ukrainian side, is that the only way to ensure that there is not a third iteration of this war, there is not a third invasion carried out by Russia, the first one being Crimea in 2014, is if there is a security guarantee. Because if they take the Russian demands at face value, which would see total withdrawals from the Donbass region, they think that this just puts them in a disadvantaged position after President Trump leaves office, in which Russia will inevitably invade their country again. So what they are really looking for at the core of all of this are security guarantees that are coming from the West. Guarantees that they really have not gotten to this point. So that's what they're looking for here. Because if the landscape remains the same, that Ukraine must withdraw from the Donbass, and maybe Russia in turn withdraws from Kharkiv and Sumy in the north and offers a ceasefire, that's not a deal that the Ukrainians are going to go for, but they are fearing that that's what Russia will attempt to put on the table here today. Maybe Russia comes back with a more modest set of demands. Maybe the West, whether that's the EU or some kind of NATO offshoot, is able to offer security guarantees for the Ukrainians. Maybe something like that is able to take fold here. But unless something changes here, the Ukrainians are anticipating that anything that comes out of this summit here is probably not something they're going to be able to agree to outright. Marky?
And just, I'll keep you here with me, Robert, for a second, but just so everybody sees at home, they just moved those air stairs away from Air Force One there. So I imagine we'll see movement from the plane any moment now. Robert, you and I have reiterated all week long, you have been on the ground since this war broke out 3.5 years ago. So you've talked to people almost on a daily basis. What's the Ukrainian sentiment this morning that Vladimir Putin is being given first mover advantage today in the United States without Zelensky in that room or at that table?
This is the whole perspective that you heard from Ukrainian President Zelensky. We were with the Ukrainian president over the presidential palace earlier this week, and he said this to us, that he believes the biggest thing that is going to come out of this summit today is a photo between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. And we thought that this was a joke that he was making at the time, but he was very serious about this, saying that that photo, when you see it, most likely, between the Russian leadership and the American delegation, effectively ends Russia isolationism from the Western world, which has been standard practice from the West since 2022, since this invasion of Ukraine took hold once again in the early months of 2022. So they believe that the whole landscape is changing here, and that Russia now effectively has a seat at the table again. They've been invited back to American soil. So the Ukrainians are concerned as all of this is happening here. And again, they believe that Russia is going to attempt to deceive the United States. On the other hand, President Trump has said that he's coming into this meeting here open-minded to see once and for all if the Russian delegation is serious and is earnest in making a peace deal or some kind of an arrangement here. It is truly one of those situations, Marky, in which only time will tell, and we'll all get a better idea of all of this in the coming hours here. Yeah. Marky?
And there goes Air Force One. Probably down the runway here pretty quickly, wheels up pretty soon, I'd imagine. Trump has called today a chess match. He's put his success chances at 75%, says there's a 25% chance that these talks just fall through. Robert, I found it interesting that the White House said that, there could be a joint press conference today between Putin and Trump after the lunch meeting. We'll see if that happens. Let me just ask you quickly, these sirens behind you, that's coming from you in Kyiv. Yes? What's going on there?
Yeah, that's coming from us here right now. So, you just think of all the timing of all of this, Marky. You're watching Air Force One about to depart Joint Base Andrews. The president is on a recon mission to determine if Russia is serious about wanting peace or not. And you hear what's going on behind us here. Air raid sirens going off in Kyiv right now. Russia at this hour keeping the pressure on Ukraine as they're very clearly attempting some kind of an effort here in eastern Ukraine. You don't necessarily know when these sirens go off here if it's the Russian Air Force. This could be anywhere in eastern Ukraine. But if it is a drone that the Russians are putting in the air or a ballistic missile, it's a bit more pinpoint in nature. But this just underscores we're about to quite literally hit the 11th hour of all of this. And Russia very much so keeping the pressure on the Ukrainians, the threats from Russia remaining ever present here as the president is about to take off and head towards Alaska for this, as he described himself, high-stakes summit to determine if the Russians are serious about making peace or not. Marky?
The cacophony of warfare still ongoing. Robert, I'm going to let you go. Keep us posted and let us know your movements here in the next few minutes.